A groundbreaking model uses remote sensing data, machine learning, and human rights expertise to shed light on slavery at sea. Vessels known to have crew that are subject to forced labor behave in systematically different ways to the rest of the global fishing fleet, reveals a new paper published in the scientific journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The discovery was used to build a first of its kind model to identify and predict vessels at high risk of engaging in these abuses. The study found that up to 26% of the approximately 16,000 industrial fishing vessels analyzed were at high risk of using forced labor, a type of modern slavery. As many as 100,000 individuals are estimated to work on these high risk vessels, many of whom are potential victims of forced labor. The study also shows where these high risk vessels fished and the ports they visited. For several years now, international media has shone a spotlight on forced labor in the world's fishing fleet, but its extent has been largely unknown. By combining satellite data, machine learning, and on the ground expertise from human rights practitioners, the researchers have identified vessels with a high risk of engaging in human rights abuses. Their findings can be used to unleash new policy and market actions that have not previously been possible. The research team compiled 27 different vessel behaviors and characteristics that might indicate forced labor on board and can be observed using Global Fishing Watch's satellite vessel monitoring data. Machine learning techniques were applied to a database of approximately 16,000 longline, squid jigger, and trolley vessels to build the predictive model that can discriminate between high and low risk vessels. The database includes 22 vessels that have previously been publicly identified by news agencies and NGOs to have labor abuses on board. The study assessed the reported vessels against risk indicators defined by the International Labour Organization (ILO) and determined they were highly likely to have engaged in forced labor. Looking at annual behavior across the 16,000 vessels from the year 2012 to the year 2018, the model correctly predicted forced labor in more than 90% of reported high-risk activity and discovered as many as 4,200 new high-risk vessels. The study found the most important indicators for distinguishing high-risk vessels include traveling further from ports, higher engine power, more fishing hours per day, more time spent fishing on the high seas, and fewer fishing voyages in a given year than other boats. Longliners had the largest total number of high-risk vessels. But when looking at the prevalence of high-risk vessels within fleets, squid jiggers had the highest percentage of high-risk vessels, followed closely by longline fishing vessels and then to a far lesser extent trawlers. High-risk longliners were found to be operating globally, whereas areas to the west and southeast of South America, the southeast of Russia and to the west of India were found to be hot spots for high-risk squid jiggers. High-risk vessels visited ports predominantly in Africa, Asia, and South America, although exceptions include Canada, New Zealand, the United States, and several European countries. These high-risk vessels visited ports in 79 countries in the year 2018, including 39 countries that are parties to the FAO Port State Measures Agreement, a treaty aimed at tackling illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing through the enhancement of port state control. These ports are both potential sources of forced labor as well as transfer points for seafood caught using forced labor. Squid jiggers and longliners flagged to China and longliners flagged to the Republic of Korea, Japan, and the fishing entity of Taiwan were most frequently found to be high risk. UCSB and Global Fishing Watch aim to further develop this model to provide governments, enforcement bodies, and international agencies with a robust tool that can be used to assess risk of forced labor on vessels and support targeted inspections through relevant policy mechanisms. A forced labor risk tool may also be useful to the seafood sector and market-based programs when they conduct supply chain risk assessments, helping to incentivize improved working conditions. Forced labor, restriction of movement, debt bondage, and poor working conditions are increasingly recognized as part of a human rights crisis in the fisheries sector. The ILO estimates that 16 million people were victims of forced labor in the year 2016, with 11% in agriculture, forestry, and fisheries.